Glad to have you guys join us on this beautiful journey, breezy ride along, and with Manjula Padmanabhan. Please give her a big round of applause. Um, Manjula is a novelist, a playwright, and a cartoonist, illustrator. She does everything beautifully. And her comic strip character, Suki, has appeared in mass circulation newspapers throughout the country. So let's grab the steering wheel. We're going to drive along Manjula's book, Taxi. She will read out a few pages for you so that you get a feel of what the book is about.
Hello, is this on? Okay. Thank you, Anupama. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Whenever someone reads a list of my so-called accomplishments, I always want to say, I really only do two things. I write and I draw. And there are variations within that, but that's really all I do. It's not that I'm a playwright and then I'm a novelist and then whatever. So I think one of the things that we will talk about this book, before we get to the questions we have prepared, I should say a few things before I start to read my section, because unlike what most of us do, which is to just read the first few pages, I thought I would tell you a little bit about the character. So the book is called Taxi. And I have to tell you that even with such a simple word, one of my friends in the US, seeing the cover, said she wondered if it was an exotic Indian word, which was ta and chi. So, even with a very simple word, you sometimes have to explain. Okay, so Taxi is the story about a woman who calls herself Madam Sen. She has renamed herself Madam, and the short form is Maddie. So she's known as Maddie. She has returned to India after many years abroad. She had an idea to start a taxi service, but not as a metered cab with the existing taxis. She wanted to have a private taxi service using her own car. So she has her own car, which she uses as a taxi just for women. So it is not illegal, but it is slightly clandestine. So the opening scene has her taking a client back to the client's home, because she waits. She'll wait for clients. And this is a young girl who, from the way she's dressed and the time of night, is very clear that she is a night worker. And but she's fancy. She's dressed in fancy clothes. She's going home at 3 a.m. And clearly things have not gone well for that girl, because she's crying in the back seat. But when Maddie tries to show some sympathy, she bridles and doesn't accept the sympathy. So when they get to the girl's home, instead of paying, she just leaps out of the car and goes into her building. And Maddie isn't sure what to do, but decides that she can't let the money go because she's owed a lot of money. So she goes into the building, follows the girl, and goes and knocks on the door. So I'm going to read from the point where the girl opens the door. The door was flung open, and there stood the girl. "Stop noise," she mumbled in English. In the harsh light of a naked bulb directly over the door, the young face looked misshapen. A purple brinjal had bloomed under the left eye. Both nostrils were plugged with thick screws of tissue paper looking like tusks. She caught Maddie's wrist, pulled her in, and shut the door. "I can't pay," she said. Fresh tears were now streaking down her cheeks. She jerked the paper tusks out of her nose and repeated clearly now, "He don't pay me. I have no money, nothing." Maddie took in a deep breath. The girl was standing like a stray dog on the pavement outside a restaurant, ears lowered, back rounded, trembling. Maddie wanted to slap her. Reaching with both hands for the younger woman's shoulders, she said in Hindi, "Stand straight. Come on now. Stand up. Straighten up. Now look me in the face." The girl raised her head, startled. Maddie says in Hindi, "You want me to say that I understand, but I don't, all right? I need the money too. Come on." She turned the girl around so she was facing the other way, towards the other room in the apartment. "You can do it." But the girl swung around. Her face was transformed into a demon mask of rage. It was almost comical. Her eyelids flared, her eyes became two angry, bulging orbs. The corners of her mouth were bent downwards into ugly hooks as she struggled to form words. You. Words failed her. Two bright gouts of blood flushed from her nose. She switched to Hindi. "You dare touch me, you miserable filth." Then she curses. I'm not going to read the curse words. She says, even in full flood, she remembered to pitch her voice low. "You F off now. F off." Of course, she actually doesn't say. Maddie stood her ground. She towered over the girl. "Give me even 1 rupee of what you owe me, and I'll go," she said. Her voice was calm. The girl was panting. She was still wearing her beaded dress and heels. Whirling around now, she grabbed her small pocketbook from where it lay on the table, emptied its contents. Coins and makeup and a single crisp blue note flew out of it. She snatched up the 100-rupee note, crumpled it, and threw it in Maddie's face. Then she spat a thick gob of blood and snot onto the bare cement floor between them. In a low voice, as if reciting verses from memory, she began to intone a litany of filthy terms, which I will not read out. Maddie had caught the note before it fell. She turned and walked out. She got to her car with the girl's ugly words still rattling inside her mind. She pressed the ignition switch and waited for the plush comfort of her seat and the stream of chilled air to steady her. She felt sorry for that young woman, struggling to survive in a harsh world, using the only resource she had, her body. But she felt sorry for herself too. She needed the cash. Not having it was going to be a problem. It was 4:30 a.m. by the time she got home. She rented an apartment in South Delhi. It was a luxury, this modest 2-story unit in the calm, well-ordered housing complex of the Asiad village. A luxury she could not really afford. She entered the darkened interior, poured herself a glass of cold water from the fridge, then went upstairs to her bedroom, turned on the air conditioner, and changed into a kaftan. She lit a cigarette, sitting cross-legged on her bed in the darkness, thinking. A cock crowed in the distance. She lay down and soon fell asleep. Thank you.
That was intense. If that doesn't make you pick up the book, I don't know what will. Apart from the striking cover, of course. So, okay, Manjula, I'll start with the questions. You're a cartoonist, which comes with a high observation and social commentary skills. A playwright, which provides a sense of setting and dialogue. And a science fiction writer, as we all know, which allows you to imagine dystopian worlds. How do you make that decision between science fiction and when it comes to general fiction?
Well, in the case of Taxi, because it's been a while since I wrote straight fiction, there has been, Taxi has only just come out like last week, so I'm still kind of, whoa, it's done. I'm still getting used to being asked, why have you chosen literary fiction rather than genre? And, you know, as I was saying to Anupama earlier today, I wouldn't say it's a conscious choice, but Taxi began life very many years ago, something like 20 years ago. I had an idea about a woman taxi driver, and it just popped just like that in my head, like, how about we have a woman taxi driver? And I also have to say, I don't drive, so I'm very used to taxis, and I've used taxis in many places. I grew up outside India, and my father was in the Foreign Service. So for the first 16 years of my life, I was very used to having a chauffeur. I was very friendly with the chauffeurs who drove our cars in different places, different people. But I was very used to the concept that you trust someone absolutely to get you from point A to point B. He's like a friend, but not quite. He's not like a cook. He's not like a butler in the house. He's not like a maid. He's a person who has the technical skill to drive, but he is not. It's like he uses the car for you. And if you have grown up as a, I'm very conscious that the life I lived as a child is very different to what I lived after my father retired. And I often say that I experienced what I call reverse frog prince. I started off as a princess and became a frog. And so the sense of comfort and security that I remember from childhood of being in a car driven by someone I trust is something very familiar to me. So using taxis is again something that I enjoy, and I'm really quite comfortable not being a driver. Though I live in the US, it's really almost like being illiterate if you can't drive, because you can't do anything really. But I manage. I don't use taxis there. I use friends. But it was some moment in Delhi when it just occurred to me, wouldn't it be amazing, a kind of switch, if the driver was a woman? And what would that... So I had that opening sequence. I had this chapter or something very similar to this chapter for many years, but I couldn't make it go forward. I would keep, I keep files in my drive from, year after year. I keep copying. You change your computer, you copy files. This kept being copied from one computer to the next, but I couldn't make the story go forward. And the question about why not science fiction is, I have to confess, it's because whereas I enjoy writing science fiction, many authors of science fiction will have realized that many readers hate science fiction. So I often have had to apologize to friends and family. Yes, this is another book of science fiction. You're going to hate it. So if you don't want to read it, I won't be upset. But there's always been a hankering in me to write something that my mother wouldn't mind reading. And in fact, my mother used to say, why don't you write books that my friends can read? So in a sense, this is that book. This is a book that my mother's friends can read. It is not science fiction. It's not even particularly weird, except for this little switch, that she is a taxi driver in a city that is very hostile to women. I mean, maybe Bangalore is very different, so, perhaps there are, I don't know, are there lady taxi drivers? Taxi drivers and not just auto rickshaw drivers, but taxi drivers?
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so in Delhi there are. But
there are a few.
There are, but it's like it's highly unionized, and they get specific routes. I think they don't ply anywhere in the city. And she actually says she didn't want that. She didn't want to belong to a union.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm not sure that I answered the question, but anyway, that's...
No, that answers it. I mean, I'm thankful to your mother for actually pushing you to write something.
Yeah, she's not with us, but,
yeah,
I feel her all the time. My mother could drive.
Okay. 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 So, one thing that you'll notice is that the book has these three two or three lines at the beginning of each chapter, and that, like, when I first read it, I didn't know that it was fictional.
It has little poems,
Right.
a little verse.
And they're brilliant.
Beginning of every chapter.
Yeah, so how did that come about?
So I don't plot my stories, all my narratives. I don't plot them carefully. I have a story arc. I mean, I will know from this outset that someone is not going. I mean, like the protagonist, not going to die, or is going to die. You know, either way. But I have a general sense of where something will go, but I don't have a story. I don't have a completed narrative. Because as far as I'm concerned, the act of writing is very much one of discovery. It is doing a puzzle it's like having a jigsaw puzzle where I'm creating the puzzle pieces and then finding a way to fit them all together. And that is part of the pleasure for me. Of the work. I mean, that is what I enjoy, is to find my way. So in the case of this book, I would say the first puzzle piece was a woman taxi driver, but I wasn't able to form any of the other pieces. And then just about 2 years ago, there was something triggered me, a conversation I had triggered. All the other pieces began to fall into place. And it was only a question of how do I fit them into a narrative. This is still not answering about the verses. And as the other pieces began to form, and you know, the story begins to take shape, and then you begin to feel at a certain point, you begin to feel a kind of tedium, you know, okay, come on, let's get to an end. How are we going to end this? How are we going to put all these pieces together towards a finished product? There was a point at which I don't want to give it away, but there is a purpose to these verses. They're not there for no reason. At the same time, they're not really connected to the chapters. What happens in the chapters has very little to do. It seems as if they're connected, but they're not. So when I got towards the end of the book and I saw an opportunity, I then realized, in order, you know, you don't want to give readers a completely new piece of information right at the end to explain everything. So even though that does sort of happen, these little verses are a tiny hint, a clue that something is coming. And I wrote the verses very much as having got to this point at the end of the book that, yes, okay, I had a certain thing I wanted happening. I thought, well, you know, just as a little bit of frill, a little decoration, I'm just going to throw in these verses. And I just wrote them. I write doggerel. I'm not a poet, and I'm very clear. I'm not a poet, but I very easily write rhyming verse. That's not the same thing as being a poet. And I do that extremely easily. It's something I've done since I was a very small child. So I thought, let's just do this, just for fun. Yeah. And it kind of worked. It was fun.
She sprinkled them all across the book, so please read those as well. Okay, so this is a question that I would like to ask her. I mean, if you notice the cover on the spine, there's this beautiful Nimbu Mirchi, which is just glowing. And there's a brilliant story behind it, if she would like to share it with us.
So all the while I was writing this, you know, this version of the book pretty much fell out between 2021 and the end of 2022. It was like, you know, when you can sense that a balloon is going to burst, it was very much like that. It just had to get done. And all the way through, as I was writing this version, I could see, it was so clear to me that the cover was going to have an ornamental Nimbu Mirchi, you know, what the taxi drivers, I don't know whether they do that here, but in Delhi, all taxi drivers have a Nimbu Mirchi on their cars. And it was very clear to me that it was going to be on the cover. It would say TAXI and the Nimbu Mirchi would be hanging down. I could see this in my mind. And I even, as soon as I delivered the manuscript, I was already pushing and saying, this is what I want. I'm not going to influence anyone, but this is what I want. And I even bought on Amazon a Nimbu Mirchi ornament. And I said, see, I got... and they were very kind. And the design department actually, they tried it. And it just looked awful. It just didn't work at all. And even though, the thing is you get fixated and you get stuck with something, I couldn't force it. And then we just could not find our way. And the thing is, the book came together very fast.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it really... we had a final manuscript was in January.
Yeah.
And second edit was by March.
Done it by
and
March.
then it was done. And we couldn't find our way to a cover at all. My mind was blank. I could only see Nimbu Mirchi and nothing else. And none of the, the scenes in the book and so on. I was very keen that it shouldn't be slotted as a women's book, or certainly not a driver's book, and not
to be a fun narrative.
I mean, we were sort of thinking of things to do with cars and with steering wheels, and none of this was working,
Right.
So we went with a very
Minimalistic, but very striking cover, I must say,
and
with the choice of colors.
These colors, I think the colors were what I was very keen that we have just very bright colors. Let's just do nothing else, just bright colors. But we have the Nimbu Mirchi at the back. And I wanted it that way. So when in a bookstore, you see it, and you see this little good luck symbol here, and I felt it'll help it along the way.